Just wanted to let you know that one of my oldest and dearest friends is on the podcast today. It is so fun to have a face-to-face conversation with her, sitting there not far from the Pacific in Santa Monica, California, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. And to let you know that she has been a promoter of civil conversation for decades and a fan of the podcast. And if you want to support and uplift conversation between men and women that is not a food fight or a shout fest in this day and age, the simplest way to do it is to just leave us a good review. That's just simple. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes a few minutes. Review the book on Amazon, which is called What She Said and What I Heard. And those reviews mean an awful lot. They really do. So thanks.
We can all feel the moon. We can all feel the sun. The more you tune into the planets, you can see how they move in your body.
What is the sound of one man listening? This is Man Listening, a fresh podcast featuring the stories of strong women who bounce back. Man Listening, because every woman deserves to be heard.
Hi, I'm Stuart Watson, and welcome to Man Listening. Between the Santa Monica Pier and the Santa Monica City Hall in California on the Pacific Ocean is a park called Tongva Park. The Tongva people were the first inhabitants of Los Angeles, long before it was the City of the Angels. And in that park, that's where I met one of my oldest friends, Robyn, who drops a lot of ancient wisdom on us. And I'll bottom line it to begin with. She doesn't think that we get here by accident and that we have a purpose. And it starts with the story of how her parents got together, and it amazes me at how we reflect on how unlikely it is that any of us get here and what it is our lives during this incarnation really mean. So we get pretty deep pretty fast, and it's a ton of fun. It really is. There's a lot of history and a lot of ancient wisdom in this talk. I hope you enjoy it.
Where were you born?
Well, Stuart, let's back up a little bit. I can tell you where I was conceived.
Oh my God! Most people, I'm too embarrassed to ask that.
Okay, well, this you'll appreciate this story. I was conceived on Staten Island, New York, a place where I've never lived. I've lived in New York, but not on Staten Island. And when I did move to New York City when I was 24, my father, who had had a couple of glasses of wine, announced loudly to an entire restaurant that I was returning to the city of my conception. And he just thought that was fantastic. My dad was training for the job he had for many years. And then I was born in El Paso, Texas, a place where I've also never lived. My parents actually met in New York, so they were both quite fond of New York. My dad, 2 degrees at Columbia, his undergraduate and his law degree.
Wow.
And yeah, it is a wow. Plus he was scholarship, so that's a super wow because he was the top of his class in both schools. My mother was in art school. My mom, and neither of my parents were from New York. My dad was from Southern Illinois and Arkansas, and my mom was from Oklahoma. My mom had always wanted to be an artist. And so from the time she was 8 years old, and I don't know how she found this out, she must have gone to the library and she researched it. And she found out that there was this really good art school in New York. Because she said at the time, there weren't many universities that had art programs. And she started writing letters when she was 8 years old. And every year she wrote a letter to the head of the school, this European woman, and said who she was and that she wanted to come and go to the art school. So then when my mom actually graduated from high school, her father, and she had very hands-off parents because they both drank quite a bit, but her father just announced that he was not going to let her go to art school in New York if she did, he was not going to have anything to do with helping her financially. So she went to a school in Texas and studied history. But her second semester, sophomore year, she got Bell's palsy. And so she ended up going back to Oklahoma, and she got better in 6 months. And then she told her father, I don't care, I'm going to art school in New York. And when she arrived, when she was 19, and the head of the school came down and met her and said, well, here she is at last. Because
Wow.
of course she'd read all these letters. So she met my dad because she wanted to audit some art classes, some art history classes up at Columbia. So she entered Columbia at 116th and Amsterdam Avenue. And my dad, since he was a scholarship person, he always had to do a lot of jobs to, support himself. So he was helping students get enrolled. And my mom said she went up to him because he had a name that was easy to pronounce. And so she put it took her 3 days to get enrolled. And so she goes, but I didn't give your father my phone number. It was like her friend who was with her gave him, her phone number. And so my dad for years would say, yes, I met your mother on the corner of 116th and Amsterdam Avenue. And it wasn't until I was an adult, pretty far into adulthood, I'm going, what was kind of a pickup? I mean, it's like they didn't know, and it wasn't like from the 50s. I mean, and they're in this big city. So anyway, so that's how they met.
But in that meeting,
Yes.
in your view of things,
Yes.
completely random, God's will.
No, I actually don't.
Manifestation.
I think it wasn't, because if you put all these things together, of how they both got there, because they weren't from there. Like my dad, his family lost everything during the Depression, so he really had to make it on his own, and he was kind of a quiet person. He became less so after marriage to my mother, but quiet, focused, studious, and so she pushed him to do things, and so he applied. He did apply to Columbia, and got in and did well.
When you said that you don't think your parents' meeting was mere accident,
I have more.
that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, okay.
Make the argument to me that was not completely random chance. Like, what is it about that story that makes the case to you that there was some kind of force at work beyond complete random, chaotic two people meeting?
Okay. Well, number one, that there was a delay in my mother going to art school. That there was a 2-year delay, because she did originally go to that, and that put my father he was in law school. I think he was a second-year law student when she met, but he might not have had that job enrolling students. They might not have been doing those classes in terms of the art history classes that she was going to audit at Columbia. And she took the wrong bus, because if she had taken the bus that she was told to take up on Broadway, she would have run into different students, because, I mean, that isn't a long distance between those blocks. It's in front of Low Library. One anniversary, they were in New York when I was living there, and I thought it would be a nice idea to take them up to where they met. No argument. No, it was here. No, it was here. I mean, it was like, it was in front of Low Library, but it was like, no, it was this place. But the nice thing is my dad could remember what my mom was wearing and, all that kind of stuff. But then the other thing is that my parents were married probably, about 30 years, or maybe 40 years even, when a relative of my father's died without a will in a estate. She was somebody who was like a cousin. I'm not even sure it was a first cousin. It might have been a second or third cousin of his father. And she had no children, and her husband was already dead. So they were tracking down all the living relatives to disperse equally the estate. And so when this happened, we didn't really know. We knew much more about my mother's family tree than my father's. There's a lot that was never discussed about his father. So my mom said, well, ask him to see a family tree. just say like, yeah, okay, you'll sign the papers, but you want to see a family tree of how you're related. Okay, so he gets this family tree, which was a bit more complete than just showing that this was a cousin of his father's. And what they found out by looking at this, and like I said, this was decades after they were married, that their ancestors had both been in the Cumberland Gap area of Kentucky hundreds of years before. And so my father's great grandfather or great great grandfather, and my mother's great grandmother, they were born within 5 years of each other, 20 miles apart. And the families lived there for around 100 years. This was prior to the Revolutionary War, and then they left after the Civil War. But there was never any intermarriage. And there's not a lot of people in that area. I mean that was, they were outside of the colonies before the Revolutionary War. So to me, that was the first time I thought, I wonder if there is such a thing as like reincarnation.
And where do you stand right now?
Absolutely.
So past lives.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that my parents were those people, but at some time, to me that just kind of went, wow, because it wasn't like either family stayed there. I don't even think my dad knew his family had ever been there. And it was so weird that in this little corner of Kentucky, both of their families had been, and then they meet like more than 200 years later, more than 1,000 miles in New York City.
My experience,
and they never would have met, Stuart, because there was no overlap of anybody knowing anybody.
Like, what is your moral or your ethic or your philosophy based on the notion that we go round and round and round?
Okay, this is my personal belief, and my personal belief is that we come from the light and we return to the light. But you want to return to that at the highest possible level. If you come in, it's like I don't believe in the concept of hell or purgatory per se, but I do believe that if you lead a life where you are really horrible to other people and really just not a good person in any way, and it isn't that, oh, you had one minor slip up, but it's just kind of like a lifetime of doing things that, like, you could say are in the Bible or the Quran or whatever your organized religion belief is, or whatever you were taught as a child. And if you really go against those ethical viewpoints, that you're going to come back, you might be, like in both you or my cases, we pretty much hit the golden ticket in this lifetime because we happen to be born post-World War II, and the country that during our very early childhood would be the top country in the world, and we're of the ethnicity where it was easier to find opportunities when we were of that age than if we were different ethnicities. And we both were grew up in middle class to upper middle class families, and so we had our families valued education, so we were able to get educations that enabled us to get the jobs that we could have. I would say, neither one of us, we're not the Rockefellers, we have good lives.
Amen. And I'm grateful. There are these people like you're describing, like your parents meeting or this other, who appear in our lives, and I'm wondering, how do we position ourselves? Prayer, is it just doing a bunch of interviews? How do we position ourselves to access guidance? Is it something as simple as go to a therapist or whatever, or is it, how do we make that prayer or petition to God, show me what is right, show me what is, show me what should I be doing?
Well, it's a good question, and it's a complicated question, and there's all ways you can do it. I believe that we can all access the answers within ourselves. I believe that our soul knows the way, that our soul and our heart know the direction. They know that the path that we're all on. Everybody has a different, I mean, as I said, the end game is always to return to the light, but our path there can be different. It's not, everybody doesn't have the same path. We're all here to learn different things. If we came back again and again and again, something like Groundhog Day or something, where it was all, I mean, even he like keeps changing it up, right? But if it was the exact same thing every day, that would be boring. We wouldn't do it. So I think it's quieting that inner critic. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. And some people do it through meditation. Some people do it through prayer. And there's absolutely nothing wrong, you know, that's absolutely fine. A lot of people, they go to church or synagogue or the mosque, and they pray, and they get those answers, you know, within them, like, what should I be doing? Or you can meditate and get those answers. Or you can ask the question, or even like write it on a piece of paper before you go to sleep and put it under your pillow, and just ask, can I get this answer in a dream? Also can be, you can just kind of, you know, trust your gut feelings about something. If you meet somebody and you really don't like them, I mean, just from the get-go, well, trust that instinct, because the chances are, like, even if you become, you know, get to know them or whatever, that at the end of that, how long that relationship is, whether it's 2 minutes or whether it's 20 years, you're going to find out, you know what? The first time I met that person, I was like, maybe I should back away from this. Maybe like we're not going to really get on, you know, this kind of thing. And so it can be that way with any decisions. It's like, okay, you can wake up and, like you said, the day is mine. I have free will. Which direction do I want to go home? And maybe before you go to bed, you think, oh, I'm going to go this way. But then you wake up in the morning and you go, I'm not really feeling it. Well, then trust your instinct to go the other way.
Is that a biochemical thing? Is this physiological, do you think? Or do you think it's spirit? It's something that we can't...
Well, I think it's spirit. I'm sure some people might think it's physiological, and that's okay. Whatever gets you there is like, I'm not going to... People don't have to believe the way I believe. You know, I'm fine with that. I think it really comes to trusting yourself, is really having that inner knowing, loving yourself, trusting yourself. As you know, my parents passed away recently, and so last year there was the cleaning out of the family home, which I know you write about in your book, and many people have gone through that or will go through that. And I was starting to realize, as I was going through, shamefully I'd never cleaned out my childhood bedroom, as I was going through these papers, that like in my memory, I was at church every Sunday. Well, not according to my Sunday school report card, which showed 50% attendance, and it would say things like, oh, we wish that Robyn was here more often because she has such good insights or whatever. And I'm like, what the heck, man? I could have sworn that we went to church every Sunday, right? And so then I started doubting things that I thought absolutely were true in terms of what really happened with my college acceptances. And as you know, like you, because we met there, we both were English majors at Vanderbilt. We both, you know, ended up going into different kinds of journalism. I had originally, when I applied to schools, I applied to 5. Vanderbilt was my third choice of that when I originally applied. My second choice was Northwestern. I applied to Medill School of Journalism, which, as you know, it was then and it still is considered like the gold standard. I got into every place, and then I went to visit Duke. I have to tell you, I didn't really like Duke, and I'm glad I didn't go there. I don't think it would have been the right place for me. And one of the reasons I didn't like it was, and this is from the perspective of an 18-year-old girl, I didn't see one cute guy when I went to visit. Now, I know a lot of, like, you know, fine-looking guys who went there, but I just didn't happen to see any on my visit. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I mean, yeah. But then when I went to Vanderbilt to visit, it was a spring weekend, and it was sunny, and everybody was out. And then, as I believe now, I think they actually got this rating a few years ago, Vanderbilt has overall a pretty good-looking student body. And of course, I didn't realize that these were guys who were like Southern preppy guys, and we would never, like, probably be crossing paths, but nonetheless, they were, they were cute. And so, and then I was staying with somebody from my hometown who was a junior or senior, and one of her friends was an English major, so I ended up going to one of Scott Colley's classes, one of his English Renaissance drama class. And I was like, wow, this is so intense. And then later, I actually had him, and I told him, I said, oh, I visited your lecture when I was visiting schools. But anyway, it was a really great experience, and I came back all enthusiastic, and my dad's like, well, okay, but maybe you should go to visit Northwestern. I'm like, nah, I don't know, because I didn't think I could do the Chicago winters. But so I wrote, Northwestern, and I told them I've decided to go to Vanderbilt. And they wrote me a letter back, and they said, well, good luck. We're pleased you made a decision. Good luck. We will hold a spot in our sophomore class for you if you decide to transfer. And I said, oh, okay. And so I would tell the story years later to people I met who went to Northwestern, and they said, you got into Medill? And I said, yeah, Legally Blonde. I'm like, yeah, it's hard. And so they go, you can't even transfer into Medill if you're in one of the other schools from Northwestern. It is so hard to get into Medill. And so when I start finding these things like, oh God, I really wasn't in Sunday school every Sunday, I thought, did I really get into Medill? Was I really accepted there, or was I just accepted into Northwestern again, which would have been fine. It's a great school. But I did find the acceptance letter, and I did find the letter where they said that they held my spot in the sophomore class. So maybe 10 or 15 years ago, because I was at that age where you kind of start thinking, did I make the right decisions? Did I go on the right path? And so I just kind of closed my eyes, and I did ask the question, what would have happened if I had gone to Northwestern, to Medill? And it came back immediately like I was watching a movie. And immediately it was that I would have been a war correspondent with something like the BBC. I would have, as you know, I've never married, but in this circumstance, I would have been married twice, once to either an Italian or an American living in Italy, and the other time in England to a British officer. But twice divorced, never children in any of these scenarios. And of course, I would have been me, but a much harder version of me, because obviously to be a female war correspondent, you're going to have to, have some cojones, right? And which I do, but so it would have been a much, much harder version of me. And of course, we wouldn't be sitting here probably, because unless we met at some journalistic thing, we never would have.
I want to understand what you're telling me about all this.
Yes. This is just showing that those were two very viable paths for me.
Yes, and you picked the one that was better for your spirit and better for your...
I probably ultimately, right. I would say I would have had a more high-profile career that way than I did. It isn't that I didn't have a high-profile career, but it would have been a different kind of career. It would have certainly been more of this is a journalist kind of thing.
There is this notion that we are presented with almost like an obstacle course, almost like a level on a video game. And this time around we have to, face these obstacles. And it's for the purpose of the overall education of the soul as it migrates. Am I hearing some of that?
Yes. And like I said, I'm just using this as an example for showing that, and I believe that this is true of not just me, but many people, probably all of us, that there is more than one way to get to our end goal in this lifetime. It in many cases will involve different people. So it'll be a different way, but still the lessons that you need to learn. And in the case of my parents, it took them quite a while to get to each other, but they were a very, very connected couple. And so I'm very grateful that, their souls worked to get there. And because there was only one person that they ever came across who they knew in common, but it was someone that my dad met through his career much later, and it was someone my mother's family knew. But what are the chances that they would say, oh yeah, that he would have said to my dad, oh, I know this really cute, sparky, redheaded artist in Oklahoma. I mean, my dad would have married somebody else, right? So, and my mother had other proposals. So,
But what does that mean for Rob? Does it mean that you wouldn't have happened, or that you wouldn't happen in this incarnation, or what are you?
Well, I think that my soul. It's interesting. I think that my soul would have, perhaps had other parents or gone with one over the other. Certainly, there would have been differences in the personality, but yeah, it's something that I don't break down too much.
So, where are you on the planning thing?
Me personally?
Yeah, like, do you think?
Okay, well, I have to tell you, this gets into astrology.
Please, I want to get there. Thank God it only took us 45 minutes.
Okay, well, I have something. I have Saturn conjunct my sun. What that means is that those are two planets that are right next to each other. Now, the sun represents yourself. It's like, it's like your energy. It's like who you are out there in the world. Saturn is about structure and form, the rules, the things. To have Saturn on your sun means that you will never not be responsible. You will never not get the paperwork done. You will never not, have things.
You're going to have your taxes filed.
Absolutely. It's like I was trying to explain this to somebody, and I said, it's like I understand conceptually how somebody could bounce a check, but I have to tell you, I really don't get it. It's like, how can you write, I mean, I know sometimes people do it deliberately, but how can you just not know that you didn't have that amount of money? I said, it's like Saturn and the sun, that never doesn't happen. Or, for example, and I'm not putting this on you, you took a longer pathway through college, right? And I have to say that never would have flown with my parents. It would have been like, okay, we're jerking you out of there, and you're going to be living in the basement, and you're going to be going to the local school, and you're going to be working and paying us back for the tuition that you. But that was like Saturn on the sun. Plus, it's like, oh my God,
so
I can stay up all night. I can stay up all night and party,
accountable.
but I still have to show up to school. I still have to get my papers done.
Yeah.
If somebody tells me to meet them at 1 o'clock in front of the Fairmont, I will be there at 1 o'clock in front of the Fairmont.
Even if that guy is only there at 2 p.m., you will still be.
I won't have like that. So it's like, I don't plan. I'm not somebody who plans like so much, but I always internally, and some of this just happens to be what they call fixed stars that hit my chart. I have an instinctive sense of timing. I always know when it's the right time to do something. I don't actually write things down in terms of like appointments or something, because, and I've said this for years, I said the brain is a computer. It's like if you put the information in, it will come out at the right time. This is very much, it's like in the old days when you would have to feed data into the computer and then it would spit out as a program. That's what I mean. It's like the data is being input, like this is when I need to have this happen, or you make a phone call.
Oh, I get you. It's a much more kind of, almost like a mechanical
It is. It's more like Dr. Spock is what it's like. That's
less manifesting, more.
Yeah,
Dr. Spock.
That's what it is. It's like this is pragmatic. This is just a pragmatic function that I'm not wasting paper. When I swear to God, I wouldn't look at it. I mean, it's like I never do to-do lists. It's like, what's the point?
You have taught me a little bit about what you know about astrology, having studied it for years. What I don't understand is how the relationship of all these various things could influence something like personality or worldview or ethos or whatever. You see?
Okay.
So help me out.
Okay. Well, there's first of all, one of my astrology teachers, the way he explains it is that astrology is the highest of the lower mysteries. Meaning that it is a big subject that takes, and not everybody's in complete agreement with it, that you can study your whole life and still not, have everything down with it. Until relatively recently, I think it was until Newton, astrology and astronomy were interchangeable. And so, and now it's like, oh, astronomy is science and astrology is we're going to put that over there with the tarot cards and all this kind of stuff.
Which, by the way, I'm not throwing out the tarot cards.
No, me neither.
Go ahead.
In fact, it's the originally, like going back to the Mesopotamians, the Babylonians, they worked with, and the Egyptians.
People who gave us math.
Yeah, they worked with stars, but they worked with what they call the luminaries, which is the sun and the moon, and then they worked with the 5 planets that they could actually see with their naked eye, and that they could actually track in the sky, and they could actually figure out what was going on with them. And that's Mercury and Venus, which are actually tied to the sun. They're so close to the sun's gravitational pull, that they can only go so far from the sun. And then Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And one reason why you think of Saturn as like something that is like about structure and form is like that was putting the boundary out with the sky. That was the planet, the furthest planet that they could see with their naked eye. The planets, and then later when with the telescope and everything, they came across Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which astrologers will still use because Pluto is actually quite influential. But they put they're further out, they move much more slowly, so those are really what they call generational planets, because they're going to be not that different throughout a generation. So they will have a similar kind of a generational impact on somebody, opposing to the moon, which moves very quickly, like every 2.5 days it's in a different sign. The zodiac is 12 signs. Getting to your point of what does this all mean? What does it make us, act like? Well, according to when everything is, when you're born, things, you can track it according to what's on the rising of literally the horizon, like where the planets are in relationship to the horizon, which they calculate, in astrology, it's the latitude of where you're born. So there's the horizon, and then there's, opposite it where things would set, and that's called the descendant. And that's what's referred to, like, deals with relationship, because the rising deals with you personally, and the setting is the other. It's like how you relate to the other.
How you relate to yourself, how you relate to the world.
No, how the other, specifically a partnership.
Oh, I get you.
Whether it's a personal partnership, relationship, or whether it's business.
I see.
It's very much about relationship, commitments and relationship. That's the setting. What you can look and see where the planets are in relationship to the time you're born with what the midheaven, what's actually at the apex, and then opposite that is the nadir. And so that's known as the midheaven. And so because that's right up in the sky, that's associated basically with how people in the world see you. And the nadir, which is below, is
so in other
the
words,
home
straight
and roots.
Above or straight below.
Yeah. Okay, now those two things, and these are points. These are points that are figured out mathematically. So these aren't, those 4
like
points.
northeast, southwest
Yeah,
points.
exactly. So that's referred to as the cross of matter. And that is how the physicality joins up with the spirit. And what's happening with the spirit, it's how, where the planets are, according to, and again, this is a mathematical calculation, the size of the houses, the 12 houses of the zodiac, where those planets line up. Those 12 houses all have a different meaning. And all these are in different signs. And the thing is that we talk about the collective unconscious a lot, and this very much feeds into the collective unconscious because there's mythology attached to all of these signs, very elaborate, detailed mythology that comes through to us through the collective unconscious, and that many cultures have held these stories for many years.
Millennia.
And so this is very much like, and this is one reason Jung would not have a session with somebody without looking at their chart. And so there's some people who don't believe it and never will believe it, and that's okay. I'm not, I don't try to proselyte.
You're not an evangelist.
My family, no one will give me their birth time. It's like they don't want their chart done. But I have extended family.
Well, by the
people
same
who've married
token, they don't
into it,
say we're
or
not
these-
talking to you. We're
No,
not.
but they're just like, yeah, whatever. Robyn's just her latest thing. It's like, yeah, that's okay. But and that's fine. And I don't mind that they're not interested or whatever. And I have friends who they'll just change the subject. But the thing is, it's like when you're saying the moon, and yes, we can all feel the moon, we can all feel the sun, we can all see how the sun affects us. But the more you tune into the planets, you can see how they move in your body. You can see how they really do affect you, how they move in your body. You have to tune into. For example, in Christianity, what heralds the birth of Christ? Well,
The star.
is the Star of Bethlehem. The three magi who saw the star, they knew what it meant, and they travel to come see this baby. Okay? And so and again, that was at a time when people would look at signs and they would see things, and that's every Christmas. Everyone sitting in a Christian church hears that story about this, and there's songs about it. But at the same time, not everybody, but some Christians would think that astrology was like not something you should be getting involved
It's
with.
of the devil.
Yeah, in some there's some belief system with that. It's like, oh, that's, but it's so complex. It's nothing that we can discuss in a few minutes, and there's many viewpoints on it, different things. The kind I use, it uses Ptolemy was the person. He did quite a lot of work with
Mathematician.
yeah, he did quite a lot of work with the planets and the stars and aspects, which is planets forming. Like I said, my Saturn and Sun are right next to each other. That's called a conjunction. Well, he figured out all these things and how you can track this. The planets follow the sun. The path of the sun is called the ecliptic. The planets that we work with, the sun through to Pluto, all follow the ecliptic. So the ancients called the planets the wanderers, because they would move. Like over the course of a year, they move. We know this. You can track. You can just see it in a month. You can see how the moon will move completely around, in your area, like go full circle in a month. The sun does that over a year, and other things like they'll rise and they'll set at different times. And the Egyptians didn't work so much with the planets. They worked with what are known as the fixed stars, because the stars, and there's many stars in the sky that are not in constellations that we do or they know of, or that they or talk about with the planets, or they are, but we don't talk about those stars so much. But they, according to latitude, they will rise and set at the same time, at that same latitude, consistently. And so they're fixed. Well, they follow the pole star, the North Star. They're not on the ecliptic, but they're very important. And so the Egyptians charted the fixed stars, and Ptolemy also worked with the fixed stars, and me too. I studied with a woman named Bernadette Brady, who really she did put this knowledge back, and she pulled it back from the Mesopotamians and put it back out there for people to work with, and other people work with it in a different way.
How'd she discover it?
I
You don't know?
I probably do, but I can't remember. She's a real academic. She's just a wonderful person, and I had the privilege of being on a trip where she was the guide last year in Egypt, where we were looking at the cosmology of Egypt. And so when we would go into a tomb, we were all looking at the ceiling of the tomb, not the side. And the people who worked in there, they said, we've never seen this. We've never seen people come in and only look like up at the top and seeing what's going on. But their big star was Sirius, because Sirius, the dog star, that coincided with the flooding of the Nile. The rise of Sirius every year. And of course that meant that the land would be fertile, because the Nile Valley would flood. So they really did that. So if you look and see the planets, like on and then they charted, like, every day the sun, the sun rises, it's in a boat, and they row across, and then they set, and every day it goes into the underworld called the Duat, and it's there until it rises again the next day. So that's the whole, what the Egyptians do is complex. I realize this is probably not making sense to anybody.
There's the old saying in science, really old saying, that correlation does not equal causation. I have a harder time with is, and am I more of a go by the seat of my pants, gut decisions, and less of a list maker and a pluses and minuses? Do I have an easier time with words and a hard time with spreadsheets because of the relative positions of stars and planets at the moment and place of my birth?
Yes.
That's what I.
Yes.
That's
you do.
what I
and
struggle.
I can tell you about you.
Because you've done my chart.
Yeah, both your sun and moon is in Aries. Those are fire signs, and that's quick. That's inspiration. That's like this. And Aries don't plan. They just don't.
Well, I don't plan.
Well,
I know that.
They don't. It's just, as I heard one Aries sun say recently, it's like, we think we know it all. It's like, you can't. And she said.
I don't think I know it all. I just think I'll be paralyzed if I sit around and think about maybe this.
It's active. Communication. That's just your jam. You're going to get up, every day. That's your work.
Simple declarative sentences.
You can, and notice I'm not using them. I'm not doing sound bites because I wasn't a war correspondent.
Yeah.
If I'd been a war correspondent, I would be doing sound bites. I mean, I was always interested in astrology. Actually, it's interesting. Both of my parents, I felt like at the end of their life, kind of gave their affirmation for me to do this. But my mother always started from a very young age, and this was because, getting back to where I was born, the question from many minutes ago, I was born the day before my sister's second birthday, so she thought I was her present. And we get along great. We're very different people, but we get along great. And that would be what my mother couldn't figure out, because she's like, I don't get it. You both are Sagittarius. How can you be so different? So that was my mother. My mother was very good at inspiring people to do what they should be doing. And that was her way of saying, at a very young age, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times she said this, of saying, you go, you find that out. You figure out, like, why you two, how you can be so different when you're born in the same family, you're only 2 years apart. You have the same thing. And then my dad, when, as you know, I took care of my parents the last 5 years of their life, and they both had different illnesses. And one of the things my dad had was vascular dementia. And so we were having a very coherent conversation. It was about, I'm trying to think, probably about 2.5, 3 years before he passed. And so he said, if you had 2 years that you could do anything, what would you do? And I was kind of flirting with, I should really study astrology, because I mean, I was there taking care of them. It's like, I was interested. So I told him about these classes I'd seen, and my dad goes, fascinating. That's just fascinating. Now, you know, Stuart, having a dad and a father as a lawyer, that if I was 18 and told my dad I wanted to study astrology, my father would be like, I don't see how that's going to monetize. I mean, what kind of a career path is that? That's like, are you kidding me? But later, and in his later years, he said he would not, if he had to do it all over again, would not be a lawyer, because he felt there were too many unethical people in the field, and he certainly was right about that. I think he would have been a writer, probably write mysteries or something, but he was just fascinating. That's just fascinating. So I studied it. I did the charts for all the caregivers who came in and took care of my parents. And my dad, as you know, because you've had parents, your parents had the same situation, and they can be, it's not that they're having thoughts or experiences that are any less than what you're having. It's just that they're having it in a different place. And my dad would be doing his thing, but he would always stop and listen when I was doing a reading for somebody. And in the beginning, when he was really actually very, very pleasant and very funny throughout this. He was not angry or violent at all. In the beginning, sometimes there could be frustrations, and I would just show him his chart, and he would just calm down.
Wow.
And my dad actually died on the exact day that he was in something called a Pluto opposition, which not everybody gets. We're in a particular time period because Pluto moves around. It takes like 267 years, I think, to circle back to the place it was. But it's slows down and speeds up. And we just happen to be at a time where we're actually, if we live to be in our 80s, where it will reach the opposite point that it was when we were born. But not everybody has that. Our grandparents might not have had, like grandchildren might not have it. But anyway, so it's considered pretty profound anytime Pluto does anything. And then also, he was in a Saturn return, and he was having an exact hit on a Saturn return, and that's the day he died. And I discussed it with him, like 6 months before it happened. I said, Dad, I just want to let you know this is happening, and I'm not saying that it's going to have I just want to let you know, because in my own mind I thought I'm going to really track this, because I felt that if it wasn't death, that there would be a change in his condition.
Wow.
And then my mom actually died when she was just going into her Pluto opposition, and so. So that's something that I'll let you know when yours is happening. I mean, because I've already kind of marked it on my calendar. Even if you're not planning, you could say, okay, but if I reach 80 some odd, this could be. And I should look it up for Helen to tell you if Helen's going through that. Honestly, just so you're aware.
Yeah.
If she is.
That's intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, because I don't have to have her time. If you just know her date and year, I can let you know. If she's just in the ballpark of those things.
What do you think your legacy is from this particular incarnation?
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of people who probably, don't like me. Were really glad when I left that job. It's just the way it goes. Sorry. I mean, I don't dislike anybody, but there's certainly things go down out there, women. When you're a woman, like one of the few women working in male-dominated fields, it's like something hits the fan, and I'm never one to shy away from the confrontation, just to put it that way.
Good. I knew I liked you for a reason.
Yeah. But I think it's that what I try to do is inspire people to be their best selves, or to do what they're here to do, and that I'm a quietly generous person.
And a teacher, and you're passing along these things that you're learning.
I try to. I really, and again, I am a person that, for me, the glass is overflowing. And I do truly believe that the more you live your life with gratitude for whatever, and there have certainly been times in my life when, like I said, no, I've never bounced a check, but there have been times in my life when there was just like a couple of dollars left at the end of the month, but they were there. But I'm really, really grateful, and I think the more that you are in gratitude, it's just helpful for wherever you are in life, and to always know that life can change on a dime, and in any direction, and just tell people you love them and that they mean something to you when you still have the chance to do that.
I love you.
I love you too, and I love Lorraine, and I'm so grateful. I've said this to other people.
And you love us together.
I love you together. And for the listening audience, in case Stuart forgets, he might identify me as his wife's college roommate, but the truth is I was also Stuart's roommate.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bless
Thank you.
And sitting there in Tongva Park, Robyn and I wore masks. We sat apart. We were, very safe and civil and Fascinating conversation, and a very dear friend. She and I can get on the phone and talk for 2 hours, no problem. I love you, Rob, and I appreciate your time.
Man Listening is a production of Unmediated LLC in cooperation with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. Allison Andrews at Andrews Creative and Rachel Clapp Miller are developmental producers. Sally Higgins at Higgins & Owens tries to keep us legal. Our music is A Day at the Park by the group Pictures of the Floating World. Your announcer is Catherine Smith. That's me. Please go to our Patreon page. You'll find us at patreon.com. Look for Man Listening, one word, no spaces. We hope you'll join us by becoming a member. A small investment can raise up the conversation. If you want exclusive member merch like a t-shirt, we can arrange that too.
A huge thank you and a shout out to everyone who supported the podcast, whether you gave us a great rating or whether you sent us money or whether you just are a subscriber and a listener. I really appreciate all of it. I'm grateful to you.
Don't forget to support us at Patreon. We believe one voice can change the conversation. Click the subscribe button, and next week you'll hear.
I got out of the bedroom and I picked up a pair of scissors and went for my boyfriend's neck.
You call him a boyfriend.
What else can you call him?
You could call him a kidnapper.
That's next week on Man Listening. Thanks.